And welcome back to Littles by Lyra. Anyone else staggered by egg prices lately? Yeah, me too. So I got to thinking about starting my own chicken coop and quote-unquote growing my own eggs. But alas, that is not currently a feasible option. However, what's to stop me from building one for my 24th scale dollhouse? So let's begin. I started by measuring out the dimensions for a roof, the front, back, and sides of the coop. 4 squares on my grid paper are each equal to 1 inch, so that made sketching it out super easy. I'll leave the dimensions in the description of the video. I copied the pattern onto cardstock because the thickness of the cardstock makes tracing the pieces easier for me. Then I cut the pieces out, made sure to save my offcuts from the cardstock because we will be using those again, and then I traced the pattern pieces onto wooden Dollar Tree dominoes and used my miter cutters to cut the pieces out. If you don't have a miter cutter, use a strong pair of scissors or an X-Acto blade. After cutting out the pieces, remove the printed domino graphic paper from the other side of the piece, then sand all the edges so they're splinter-free and smooth. When everything was cut, peeled, and sanded, I retraced the template for the front of the coop so I could make a template for window placement. The window's 1/4 inch from the top and bottom and 1/2 inch from either side. Then, I transferred the template to the coop front piece and used an X-Acto to cut the window out. Go slowly and take care not to cut off your fingers because it's hard to get blood off the dominoes. At this point, sand the interior of the window. Next, using a skinny stick and a dried up pen, I scored siding lines onto the wood. It's so soft it took to the scoring super well. Then I took an oak-colored Dollar Tree wood stain pen. They're the pens you use to hide scratches on wood furniture, and they're in the hardware section, and I stained the wood pieces. I feel super clever on this next step. I want my coop to have chicken wire, but where do you find 1/24th scale chicken wire? I used Tulle. I used white, but they have every color, so go crazy and customize away. I painted wood glue around the window and stuck the Tulle onto the side that I peeled the domino paper off of. Then I trimmed off any overhang. Going back to the offcuts from the cardstock, I flipped it over to the back side and I took my Dollar Tree wood stain pens and scribbled all over it. The 3 colors I used were oak, maple, and walnut. Then I flipped it over and following the graph paper lines, I cut a bunch of strips apart. I gathered them into a little bundle and cut at each grid line, giving me a nifty little pile of variegated shingles. Save one of those strips though, you'll need it later. I used the maple pen to go around the outer edge of the roof pieces, then took wood glue and glued the shingles to the top of the roof one at a time, overlapping them slightly. When starting the next row, I let the paper hang off the edge a little to stagger the shingles for that authentic feel. When everything was dry, I flipped the pieces over and snipped off the overhang with a pair of scissors. Okay, remember that strip I said to save? Time for him. Grab a ruler and measure on that strip a piece that is 1/6 of an inch wide and cut. Then, using the window as a guide, cut side, top, and bottom sashing for the window. I used wood glue to attach it. Here I'm using chopsticks to make some bracing pieces for the interior. You could also use bamboo skewers or cutoffs from the dominoes if you save them. I measured the chopstick into 4 1-inch segments and then cut it with the miter cutters, then sanded. Guys, seriously, if you don't have a miter cutter in your crafting arsenal, I highly recommend it. I applied wood glue to the edges of the front and back pieces and then butted them up against the side pieces. I used masking tape to hold everything in place while it dried. I glued one side of the front and one side of the back separately, then I glued it all together into one unit. Then I put wood glue on the pieces of chopstick and put them in the corners for extra stability. I used my T-square ruler to square off and glue together 6 3-inch skinny sticks side by side. This is going to be the floor of the coop. By this time, the wood glue was dry on the body of the coop, so I painted the interior to hide the raw paper. You can use whatever color you like, but my imaginary chickens don't need a bright interior, so dark brown it is. Then I pulled off the masking tape and glued the roof pieces onto the top. To finish the roof, I stained a long cocktail toothpick with the maple-colored pen, trimmed to size, and glued it to the roof where the roof pieces met. Next, I cut 4 skinny sticks down to 3-inch pieces and 4 pieces of skinny stick down to 1 inch. Here you see I'm gluing the 1-inch pieces to the outside of the 3-inch pieces to make a rectangle. In retrospect, I wish I glued the 1-inch pieces in line with the 3-inch pieces because it made the cage too long, but I'll adjust for that later to make it all work out. After the rectangles dried, I glued on more tulle to turn the rectangles into fences. Next, I used the floor to determine the length of the sides of the cage and repeated the process. When all the wood glue was dried, I glued the cage portion of the coop to the bottom of the floor. Here's where I realized that I didn't take into account how much width the skinny sticks would actually add. Soldiering on, I glued a couple more 1-inch chopstick pieces to the inside of the cage for stability. Then, with one of the pieces of leftover skinny stick that was about 2 inches long, I measured it off every 1/4 inch. Then I glued on pieces of toothpick. This will be the chicken ramp that leads into the coop from below. I set it aside to dry and addressed the gap in the flooring next. It was really actually kind of simple. I just cut a couple more skinny sticks to the length that I needed and then glued them onto the top. Then I put 2 more 1-inch pieces of chopstick on the other corners to finish bracing beneath. Next, I put wood glue onto the bottom of the chicken coop and placed it on the top right corner of the flooring. For whatever reason, my camera ate the footage of me measuring and cutting more chopsticks, this time into 1/4 inch pieces, and gluing them onto the corners of the floor. Or, I suppose because of its side, it's now a chicken deck. Anyway, then I glued on some toothpicks to make a perch rail all the way around. That done, the chicken ramp is dry, and I glued it underneath. And that brings us to our final step. I watered down that dark brown paint from earlier to make a stain. Then I painted over the deck, the cage, and the roof to unify all the colors and give it a more finished look. Dare I say, it's a bit aged and rustic as well. And voila! What do you guys think? Did I succeed at making a 1/24th scale chicken coop? Or does it look a little bit more like a 1/48th scale fishing dock? Let me know down in the comments. I really hope you like what you saw today. And if you did, take a look around, watch, like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. You know, all the things. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next Friday. Bye!